Welcome to the Comic Book Shop of Doom. I'm your host. This video is not for children, so if you're under 13, get your parents' permission to watch this. I try to keep it clean. I don't need no fine from the FCC or YouTube or COPA or any of those guys. So anyway, today is the 20th anniversary of the death of World Championship Wrestling. So 20 years ago today, they had the last Nitro, and then they had it where they announced basically that Vince McMahon, Shane McMahon, the whole family bought the company, and they only absorbed a handful of wrestlers, like 15 to 18 guys or something, because they didn't want to pay the guaranteed contracts. So those guys had the 30 days notices and all that, and their pay things where they could get cut. And they got like Mike Awesome, they got Lance Storm, the Hurricane. I could go through the guys, but it's been a while. I'm at work, so I decided I wanted to do this, and I'm like, I'll do it now just in case if anybody does remember that today is the date. I knew it was coming up this week, and I looked it up like Monday or Tuesday, and that was like Monday or Tuesday was the day that Vince actually bought the company. It was announced that they bought it, and then they were going to follow through with the final Nitro. And then that was the one where it closed with Ric Flair and Sting. They wrestled, and Flair wore a T-shirt when he wrestled. So it's just, I think it was a bad thing when it went down. I mean, WCW's programming is heads and tails above the stuff now. And back then they looked at it was bad. The Natural Born Thrillers, and they had, the New Blood and that, and then the last year or two of Angles. And everything was trying to catch up to WWE when WCW was putting them out of business in 97, and then Vince McMahon decided to go with the smut to take over, and that's what happened, and USA let him do it, and the Turner networks wouldn't let them pull any of that stuff on there. So, WCW tried to go smut light, and it didn't work under Vince Russo. And, it's just, it was a sad thing. I mean, wrestling has been dying for the last 20 years. I point that date as everything tanked, and it lost a lot of fans. And my friend, he turned off wrestling at that point because he goes, I know what Vince is going to give me, and I don't want it. And he just said, forget it. It's done. And he sporadically watched wrestling. I mean, we used to watch it all the time. And when WCW went down, he's like, that's it. It ain't going to go anywhere. So I seen, so that's an example. And there's a lot of people that did that. So they dropped off. There was a lot of people that quit watching that stuff after Vince bought the company. And he put a lot of guys out of work. And then if you look back a couple of years later is when you see the rise of CM Punk and Samoa Joe and all these guys that I don't think those guys would have had jobs back then. That there was so many people that just quit wrestling because there was no money to be made, because then Vince could cherry pick who he wanted. And there was a lull factor there for a while, and even Vince's his developmental territories were really sparse up until a couple of years later. He had that 2002 class was like the last class where Cornette put out Cena, Lesnar, Randy Orton, and a whole bunch of other guys, Batista. And then after that, it was just downhill. But WCW was alive from 1988 when they bought out Jim Crockett Promotions up until March of 2001. So the 26th of March, yeah, it's rough. It's, you look at that and you're like, I remember watching the last show where they had it, where Ohio, that was where Raw was, and then Nitro was in Florida, and they had the simulcast, and then Shane comes out, he bought WCW, one up Vince, and I was okay with that. I thought it got ridiculous later on when Stephanie was the one that bought ECW. It was just like, oh, and yeah, they tanked the Invasion. That should have been going on with storylines for 2 years, easy, with the guys if they would have picked everybody up, or even just Goldberg, Flair, Sting, and Luger or something like that. You know, those are the diehard WCW guys, but they didn't want to absorb those contracts. The top 10 WCW wrestlers, their payroll was $400,000 a week. So Vince didn't want to take that payroll at the time. And you know, so yeah, I mean, he knows what he was making, and he probably knows everybody else would get mad, but everything's business nowadays. So all right, everybody, celebrate the 20th anniversary of the death of WCW and Monday Nitro.